Hi, everybody. And if we could please open the meeting with the Serenity Prayer.
God,
God,
grant me
God,
the serenity
grant me the serenity
to
to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
The wisdom to know the difference.
I will not mind.
and today is the 12th of July 2021. And welcome to the Monday night Zoom meeting of Overeaters Anonymous. This is a closed meeting. My name is Maria F. and I'm a recovered compulsive overeater from County Dublin in Ireland, and I'm your host for today's meeting. Our co-hosts are Mark and Rita Q. If this is your first time at the meeting or if you're visiting, please introduce yourself by your first name so that we can get to know you better.
Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a compulsive overeater. It's the first time at this meeting.
Hi, Michelle.
I'm Ilana.
I'm Louise. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm Ilana. I'm a compulsive overeater, and this is my first time at this meeting. I just moved to Portugal, so I'm on this side of the pond. Anybody wants to connect with me?
Welcome, Ilana.
Hi, my name's Louise. I'm a compulsive overeater. I'm on the other side of the pond. It's 2:30 in the afternoon in Quebec. This is great. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay.
Hi, my name is Paula. I'm from Montreal. I'm just visiting. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Paula.
Hi, I'm Annette from Toronto, Canada.
Hi, Annette.
Hi, recovered compulsive overeater. Thanks.
Welcome.
I'm Shannon. I'm a compulsive overeater from Atlanta.
Welcome. Okay. We can ask, if you could please make sure that your microphone is on mute at all times during today's meeting. And also, if you need to step away from your camera for any reason, can you please just disconnect your video? And we're going to read the preamble, and the following reading is taken from the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The preamble. Overeaters Anonymous is a fellowship of individuals who, through shared experience, strength, and hope, are recovering from compulsive overeating. We welcome everyone who wants to stop eating compulsively. There are no dues or fees for members. We are self-supporting to our own contributions, neither soliciting nor accepting outside donations. OA is not affiliated with any public or private organisation, political movement, ideology, or religious doctrine. We take no position on outside issues. Our primary purpose is to abstain from compulsive eating and compulsive food behaviours and to carry the message of recovery through the 12 steps of OA to those who still suffer. And how it works. Could somebody read how it works, please?
Yeah, I'm Monica. I'm a compulsive eater. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to the simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with food, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested, as a program of recovery.
Thanks, Monica. And could Margaret please read the 12 steps, please?
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret and a compulsive overeater. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over food and that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amendments to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to compulsive eaters and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the compulsive eater, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. That we were compulsive eaters and could not manage our own lives. That probably no human power could have relieved our compulsive eating. That God could and would if he were sought.
Thank you, Margaret. And could we have a reader for more about compulsive overeating from page 30 of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, please? Mark, could you read that?
Yeah, I can indeed, yeah. Most of us have been unwilling to admit that we're real compulsive overeaters. No person likes to think that he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our eating careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove that we could eat like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his eating is the great obsession of every abnormal eater. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that if we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we're real compulsive overeaters. This is the first step in recovery. The illusion that we were like other people or presently may have to be smashed. We compulsive overeaters are men and women who've lost the ability to control our eating. We know that no real compulsive overeater ever recovers control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. We're convinced to a man that compulsive overeaters of our type are in the grips of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which makes compulsive overeaters of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there was brief recovery, followed always by still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with our compulsive overeating agree that there is no such thing to make a normal eater out of a compulsive overeater. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet.
Thanks so much, Mark. Can we have a reader for tradition 7 from page 562 of the Big Book? I think Carol's going to read that first.
Yes, thanks, Maria. I will indeed. 562, tradition 7.
Thank you.
And tradition 7 is every AA group or OA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions.
Thank you, Carol. And Rita Q is going to read a vision for you for us.
Hi, reader, recovering compulsive overeater. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past and grow freely of what you find and joy in us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then.
Thanks, Rita. And I'd like to give a warm Irish welcome to Rick J this evening. And Rick has very kindly come to share with us this evening, and he's going to share with us for 25 minutes. So over to you, Rick.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege. This is my first international meeting that I've really shared at. I've listened to a couple, just another one of the little boxes, you know, in page after page, you know, of screen attendance. And yet it's the same message, and we have the same illness that binds us together. We have this common problem, you know, and we read about it. And you know, what I have is this disease, this illness of compulsive overeating. I have an obsession of the mind that leads me to that first compulsive bite. I have a physical allergy that, you know, that takes me to the next compulsive bite, and I can't stop till I pass out or run out. And this started for me, not because I particularly liked the taste of the food that I found some relief in, but it was the effect that I got in this food that I found. I was 6 years old, and I was living in extreme fear and a lot of emotional pain. My mother had been hospitalized. She was later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and had had a catastrophic nervous breakdown that involved my sister and I, and the police were involved. And it separated our family. And so here I am with all this going on at home, my mother in the hospital. My dad was a Navy officer who was gone a lot. My grandfather had come to stay with me, and my sister, who's 2 years younger than me, had gone to stay with my grandmother in another state. And that was my life. And then I entered the first grade with all this going on. And I truly did not have any skills, any clue on how to connect with other people. All I knew is this fear that was consuming me. And, you know, it was a period of my time where I would just stand in the corner and not speak, but I'd want to join people. And, you know, there was some bullying going on, and kids can be so cruel. And I am a product of the way I responded to my environment, you know, which was the best way I could with what I had at that particular time, as we all do. And for some reason, one day I found a jar of mayonnaise, of all things, and I began eating this jar of mayonnaise with a spoon. And there's really nothing exotic or enticing about mayonnaise, especially for a 6-year-old. But the magic part of this jar of mayonnaise was that it suddenly changed the way I felt for this brief period of time. And it gave me a sense of ease and comfort. And I went back to this jar several times. Now, if we'd have had anything with sugar in it, this was probably just enough sugar in this mayonnaise to create this effect. But there wasn't really any cookies or any sweets. cake, pie, anything, ice cream. There just wasn't anything. My parents were, extremely like kind of health nuts in that regard. And but it's no problem. I found this mayonnaise, and then it was my friend. But what happened was this jar of mayonnaise became my higher power, and food became my higher power. It was doing something for me that I couldn't do on my own. It changed the way I felt. It changed the way I related to the world around me. And that's the magic in food and addiction. And as I grew older, my mother was released after a year and then relapsed and was hospitalized again. And then there was a sense of some stability in our lives. And I lived in an environment where I did have some close friends. And then I discovered alcohol and drugs when I got a little older, and that became the dominant addiction in my life for years. And just as a part of my story, I've been sober for 34 years, but it's taken me 20 years to find entire abstinence in Overeaters Anonymous. And why is that? I asked myself that question as I relapsed yet again. Here I am. I'm no stranger to a 12-step program and a higher power and sponsors and sponsoring and spiritual awakenings and spiritual experience. But what I found for me and why this is so important for me to talk about is that I did just enough to get by, to not take that first drink. The consequences were so severe from where my drinking had taken me that I could immediately end my marriage with a drink. I could lose my life with a drink. The way that I was drinking in the lifestyle that I left when I got sober was such that to go back to that was beyond any extremes that was worth it. And so being married to someone in recovery, all my friends in recovery, I could really rest on my laurels and get away with it somewhat. And I can say that I have not had a drink in 34 years, but I cannot tell you that I was sane and spiritually connected for 34 years. So when I found my way into Overeaters Anonymous, I had gotten sober, but now there was this hole in me, that hole in my soul, that was craving something that I wasn't generating on my own. And that was a connection with a higher power and a spiritual awakening. So what would happen is I would go through the steps with an OA sponsor. I would use my tools. I would stay away from that first compulsive bite for a while. That was easy. Staying away from it for any extended period of time, though, was impossible because I did not have the connection with the power, which was solving my problem, which would solve my problem. So there came a time when in October of 2019, I had been in enough emotional pain over a situation in my life where my self-will, an extreme example of self-will running riot, did a lot of damage to my marriage. And the emotional pain that I experienced was so horrendous that, even though I'd had almost a year of abstinence, it kept driving me back into the food. And so where this took me was I had gotten to the point where I was trying to sponsor people on days that I wasn't binge eating. And this cycle of finding recovery and then having this spiritual awakening and then relapsing again, over and over, I was finally forced to concede that I simply wasn't following the directions. I wanted what you had. I wanted what somebody with permanent recovery had, but I wasn't willing to do the work. I felt like that my involvement in a 12-step program, was enough. I already knew I had this inside track. I had the scoop. I knew what to do. I was different than you. And I know we've heard the expression, I was trying to transfer my credits and they don't transfer. They just simply don't transfer. So what I did was I got a sponsor who was covered, and I went through the book with him. But there's a line here that really stands out to me, you know, in my struggles in getting abstinent. And it's on page 24 of the big book. And it says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. You know, and more about alcoholism, you know, it tags that up with this line. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases. Neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. So here I was disconnecting. You know, I would get to a point of spiritual disconnect, and then here I am. I'm not connected to the power that's solving my problem. And a case in point of this is, and I like to tell this story because it reminds me of just how powerless I am, and that in the insanity of my compulsive overeating, that I truly do not and cannot bring with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of not just a week or a month ago, but even an hour ago. And I'd gone to the doctor some years ago, and he basically called me a ticking time bomb. My cholesterol was around 400. I had extremely high blood pressure. I was pre-diabetic, 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And I was binge exercising to counter the effects of my compulsive eating. And this is in so-called sobriety. And I came home from that doctor's visit, not inspired to change anything, just joking with my wife that now I was the ticking time bomb. And, you know, and my son, he's 21 now, but he was just a little boy then. You know, he was listening to everything that was being said. So later that night, I had a big bowl of popcorn with lots of butter and salt. And I was eating this massive bowl of buttery, salty popcorn. And he came in, and I realized he was looking at me and he was crying. And he asked me if my doctor knew that if I was eating that. He wanted to know if my doctor knew what I was doing. He was afraid that I was going to die. So I looked him in the eye, and I got down to his level, and I put my arms on his shoulders, and I said, I'm your father. I love you. Thank you so much for coming up to me, and I will never eat like this again. I promise you. And we had this little ceremony where we walk over to the trash can and we dump the popcorn in. That's it. So he goes to bed, and an hour later, I'm at the computer, and I have a massive bag of candy, Skittles, that I'm eating, binge eating. This is an hour later, and he must have sensed something was wrong. So he comes into the room, and he was saying, "Daddy, are you okay?" And I took this big bag and crammed it up underneath the monitor. And again, I told him the same lie I'd told him already. I loved him. He didn't have to worry about me. I had put the food down. I was going to be healthy. And right in the middle of this little speech where he was looking very relieved, the bag must have upended up underneath the monitor, and one of the little Skittles came rolling out underneath the monitor, just kind of rolled out and dropped down on the tray to the computer, you know, the keyboard tray, bounced on the floor. And then here came another one. And pretty soon there was a whole parade of Skittles just rolling out. And he was watching each one of these, just, you know, tracking them and watching them as they bounced on the floor. And he just looked at me and he just said, "Clearly you have issues." And his little light, the little light that said that I was his hero, that, you know, everything I said, he believed, it went out. His little light went out. And I offered to take him back to bed. I had no words. And he said, "That's okay, Mommy will do it." And, you know, and the only way to get over the pain of that experience was to eat more. And the only way to get over the experience of eating more was to eat more. So the vicious cycle yet again was, you know, in had me by the throat. I literally had nowhere to go because I was not connected to another power. I'm beyond human aid. And that's what it tells us, is that I am beyond human aid, and there's no return to human aid unless we have, a spiritual help. And, and that's the solution. And it says this on page 25, there is a solution. And we drop all the way down to the bottom of the page, and it says to accept spiritual help. And there's a whole lot in between, but that's the gist of this. I'm beyond human aid. I am powerless, beyond any power that I can generate. The power must come from a power greater than me. And it tells me of this, and there is a solution. And it tells me this, and we agnostics. And I love this chapter. This is where I had hope for the first time. I had a lot of agnostic leanings when I came in here. I couldn't talk about religion. I had a lot of anger, and that's okay. I kept coming back, and I kept being willing. The thing about we agnostics, it's the only chapter in the big book does not specifically call out the step that we're reading about. All the other ones, this was the first step, of recovery. We were at step 1. We are now at step 3, or whatever, all the way. We agnostics is all about step 2, and it doesn't say anything about step 2. What it says is the words power greater 9 times. And that's where I know, and I learned that all I have to do is to be willing to believe. And this follows step 1 beautifully. If I'm truly powerless, and I have to get to that. I have to get to where I'm powerless. So now that I'm powerless, what do? I need to access that power. Now here's where the actions of the steps come in. So I'm accessing this power through the steps. And this is where my spiritual awakening is. Doing these steps, first of all, I had to put down the food. I had to identify the foods, ingredients, and behaviors that were triggering me. And we know what they are. And I abstain from them, just like I abstain from alcohol. I don't call myself sober if I'm taking a shot of whiskey, or if I'm having a near beer, or that would not be sobriety to me. It's very simple with alcohol. With food, it can be just as simple once I have the foods and ingredients and behaviors that are triggering me, and that's my alcoholic foods, and I abstain from them, and I have to put it down. Well, now I'm into a spiritual awakening that's going to start right here. And this spiritual awakening, it doesn't just come flying in, special delivery. It's ongoing, and it starts growing. And as we go through the book, we're seeing, these so-called promises, and all these promises is what the spiritual awakening is looking like. And now, knowing all this, I still was not maintaining my abstinence. The final clue, the final piece of my puzzle in abstinence, after many years of a lot of emotional pain and a lot of emotional pain management with food, came when I'd gone through this inventory process, and I had really never done a 4th column where I look at my mistakes in my inventory. And I had to do this with my mother. And I had to acknowledge that as a child, I was completely innocent and had nothing to do with her mental illness. What I had to acknowledge is what I did with this as I grew older. And as she tried to come back to me as a mother to love me and to be there for me, I rejected it. I was pissed. I had my own resentments and my own issues, and I would push her away. All the attempts that she made to connect with me. And that was my part. I never accepted her. I never forgave her. I never really understood how much my behavior was affecting not just her, but it was affecting me. It was keeping me blocked from this higher power. And that's what this whole inventory process is all about, is unblocking ourselves to this power. We have to unblock ourselves, then we have to connect to this power. And once I've got on, when I went through this amends process, and I couldn't talk to her about it now because she has dementia, and I would cause harm to try to make amends to her at this point. And I wrote a letter. I wrote a very long letter, and I poured my heart out, and I read it to my sponsor, and I cried, and I let it go, and I moved on. And now, as my amends, I am the best son I can be. I am there for her. I am here to always accept her love, to be there, to just tell her I love her. And even if she has to, to ask me the same question 5 times, in as many minutes, it's okay. I can be patient. I can be there. I can show up. I can be her son. I can love her, and I can take her love. And that's my amends to her. And I had to get through that. It took many years. And having gone through this process where now I'm unblocked, then I don't want to wait till I've completed all these amends that I'm on this road for with my sponsor. I need to get right into step 10, and it's inviting me. It is telling me that, that we continue now. We're continuing this, because if we are blocked from this power, we're vulnerable. That's the first stage of any relapse for me. It's a spiritual disconnect. I'm unblocked from this power that's solving my problem, and my selfishness, my self-centeredness, my 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, self-seeking. It's like an engine that's there. It's sort of on standby. It's in standby power mode. It's not completely gone. And I can be triggered into that engine cranking up, and you can hear it. It sounds like a massive jet engine cranking up. And then I'm
5 minutes left.
Then I can be going full blast again into my, not just self-will or self-will running riot, but I can be an extreme example of self-will running riot. And so I continue this process just like it tells me. And I'm looking for my selfishness, my dishonesty, my resentment, my fear. I'm looking at my part. I'm telling someone. But here's where I get to invite God into my thinking. It's not just enough to continue to unblock myself. In step 11, I'm invited to improve this conscious contact with this God of my understanding through prayer and meditation, by pausing throughout the day, by starting my day with God, by continuing to connect with my higher power all through the day, to end my day with God when I do my review, which for me is a step 10 with God. And in the 12 and 12, there's a very interesting paragraph on page 98 of the AA 12 and 12. It says there is a direct linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit, but when they are logically related and interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life, an unshakable foundation for life. Here I am, I'm continuing to look at myself, but now I'm inviting God in to change my thinking. I want my thinking to be transformed. This is part of the spiritual awakening that'll never stop. I want my thinking to be elevated to a much higher plane. I want this inspiration to become a working part of the mind. I don't have the power to do that. I just keep inviting God in and taking these actions. And then I'm carrying this message. I'm practicing these principles in all my affairs. I'm trying to carry this message to the best of my ability. So a dear friend of mine, says, continue, improve, and practice. I need to have this tattooed on my forehead, because my thinking is shit. Now, the first time I heard this, it was actually from an Irish gentleman who born and raised and got sober in Ireland. So the first time I heard him say it, I wasn't quite sure what he was saying, because it was something like, my thinking is shite. And then I had to wind that just a little bit. I'm like, oh, my thinking is shit. Yes, my thinking is shit. And that is me with my alcoholic mind, my chronic alcoholic mind, but I'm recovered now. It's like, what does that mean? It means that I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. So I am continuing to do this. I'm continuing to unblock. I'm strengthening that connection with my higher power. I'm inviting God in. And the one that still kicks my ass is the pausing throughout the day, where life is hitting us right between the eyes. We're in this moment. We're out here doing life. Right now, we're doing life. It's easy to be connected to God in the morning and at night at a meeting, one-on-one with your sponsor or your sponsee. These are moments of wonderful spiritual connection. But what about when I'm out there in the day? And it lets me know I can pause throughout the day when I'm agitated or doubtful. So that agitation doesn't have to blow up into anger or resentment. My doubt doesn't have to blow up into fear. I can look at this like a railroad crossing, a level crossing. And here comes the gate and the flashing lights and the bell and the train whistles in the background. This is my warning. Wait a minute. I have a little clarity now. I have a recovered mind. After all, God gave us brains to use. I'm going to use this. I can see what's coming. I don't have to wait till I get smacked by the train. I can stop and bring God into it. God is in the pause. And my old thinking, my first thought is usually my old thinking. So here comes this old thought, and I'm powerless over this thought. It's just going to come in there. So I'm not responsible for that first thought. I'm responsible for my second thought and my first action. So what I want is to let my higher power, let God bridge that old thought, that first thought, that old idea to a second thought, to a new idea. And so my action is connected to that. That's where I still have a lot of work to do, but I can claim a little spiritual progress here is that I'm seeing these coming sooner than I used to, and I'm pausing quicker, So with that, I'm going to continue my day.
It's time.
And bringing God into it in this moment with you. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rick. And thanks so much for carrying the message to us, Rick. Absolutely powerful. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And now we will open up the meeting for sharing, or if you would like to ask Rick a question, please raise your hand in the participant section and we will call on you accordingly. And if we can limit our share to approximately 2 minutes, then we will maybe get an opportunity for a good few people to share. I did see Nancy P had her hand raised a few minutes ago. Do you still want to share, Nancy?
Sorry, Maria, that was an error. Somebody, I don't know, I'm on my phone instead of my computer, but thank you. And thank you, Rick. Awesome.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy. Anybody like to share or ask Rick a question? Okay, we have Jim L.
Good evening, everyone. Jim L. here, compulsive overeater in Dublin. Thank you, Maria, for your wonderful service, and to everyone who gave service. But to you, Rick, thank you so much for a brilliant share that really kind of hit me really hard, because we parallel a lot in our recovery. I suppose the one thing that stood out was when you said the fourth column. You forgot to include that as part of your inventory, and I can tell you my whole life, at an early age, at 5, 6, 7 years old, dealt with death and abandonment and issues with my mother. And as I got older, as 8, 9, 10, 12, early teen years, I knew how to get her negative attention by acting up in school and in the neighborhood and all that, and just getting a backlash from her, and I spent my whole life looking for her approval and her love, and I always just thought, was I so ugly? Was I so fat and unlovable that, that you couldn't love me and accept me, But then when I did in recovery, my my fourth and fifth step and my ninth step of making amends, that's when I learned to realize that I'm a 10-gallon personality. In other words, I need love in a 10-gallon capacity. Whereas most normal people, I'm saying normal people who just interact and give love on a daily basis, are give it in pint size capacities, which is normal and quite, but it was never enough for me. So my poor mother, who I put through hell many times, it was never going to be enough. She was never going to satisfy my craving for her love and attention. So
Tough time.
So, you know, that's what I've learned in recovery. And thank you so much. I'll pass.
Thanks so much, Jim. And next up we have Mark. Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hi, my name is Mark and I'm a compulsive overeater. And thank you so much, Rick. And again, you know, there's so many parallels there of, you know, my mother was sick and hospitalized and always on the outside looking in and wanting to be friends with people, but couldn't be. And, you know, again, it's like I was like that agnostic. I was that person who couldn't get a higher power into my life, but you know, like my sponsor always got across to me that if I was willing to do the work, if I was willing to always tell the truth, I would be able to get recovered. And thank God, you know, God is a part of my life. And, you know, like you know, it was the food that came first, then it was alcohol. And, you know, and again, you know, it was absolute madness. And I love when you say about pausing, because you know, like a man very early in my recovery said, you know, that phrase of think, think, think. He says it's the only thing you change about the program. That it be think, think, pause, think. That, you know, we people with our crazy heads, we need to just pause just before hitting that, you know, send button on a message or whatever, or reacting to something, because, you know, invariably the first thing, my first reaction is nearly always wrong. And if I give myself just that little bit of a, you know, 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it might be, things just work out for me. And, you know, it was just great to listen to you. It was great to hear the message being shared. And it's great to see so many people here this evening. So thanks, Maria, for your service. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much, Mark. And next up, we have Carol O, followed by Rita Q.
Hi, Rick. Thank you so much for that really powerful share. And thank you, host, this evening for hosting this brilliant meeting. God, I got so much from what you said. One of the things at the end you were talking about was that spiritual connection. And I've been working on that quite a lot over time. And as you said, I loved what you said. It comes easy in the morning, it comes easy in the evening. And throughout the day, if I'm quiet, I can get the quiet moment. But it's when you're in the middle of something and the mind just goes. What do you practice, Rick? How do you push the pause button when you're right smack bang in the middle of something very emotional or dramatic going on for you?
Oh, thank you, Carol. So when I do that, and I am getting a little bit better at doing this, it's like I visualize. I'm a very visual person. And so at the first little disturbance, and I may not even know exactly what I'm calling it, it's just I'm disturbed, then I just stopped and I asked God, please, you know, redirect my thinking. And I'll say the serenity prayer. And sometimes I'll just, because it's one that we all know and I can use it. It's a good crisis prayer because it's short for one thing, and we all know it. And I will put that in. I will put this serenity prayer into a specific situation. God, grant me the serenity to accept this situation. What is this situation? To accept it, the courage to change this, whatever I can about this situation, and the wisdom to know the difference. And, you know, and sometimes, you know, if I'm boiling it down a little bit, I'm praying for serenity, courage, and wisdom in this moment, in this situation. And it's for me, it's like, I do not want to get smacked by that train, you know, and because the train is my self-will. So I really am, I'm trying to train myself, and I actually have a timer and I set it. You know, it tells me to, you know, to constantly remind myself I'm no longer running the show, and to humbly say to myself many times, each day thy will be done. Do I do that? No. Am I getting a little better? Yes, a little better. So that for me is what I do. Now, when I've completely blown right through my pause and I get smacked by the train, there's usually somebody else that's involved, and I'm doing a step 10. You know, I know I'm calling somebody. I've got people that I call. I have to do this. But I never leave a step 10 without doing a step 11 on it, and invite God in to change my thinking in this matter and to give me inspiration on it as I go forward. And so the next day, you know, the same thing could happen again if I'm like, oh, wait a minute, you know, and I'm pausing and I'm inviting God in. That's really all I do. It's just that disturbance. And then I know, I mean, I'm starting to get pissed off. I'm getting impatient. That's a big one, you know, impatient, intolerant. Those are some of mine. And as soon as I start feeling that, that is a time for me. And a pause can be simply just like this for 30 seconds and keep going. That's maybe all I have, but it's about that connection.
Thanks so much, Carol, and thanks so much, Rick. And next we have Rita Q, followed by Michelle W. You're for 2 minutes, Rita.
Thanks, Maria. Rick, thanks so much for that. That was fantastic. My name's Rita Q. I'm a recovering compulsive overeater. I just loved how you talked us through your journey, and it's really funny. Hollywood really glamorizes drug addiction in movies. You know, you see somebody taking a heroin, and it's like, wow. You know, they fall back in the bed, and it's like they get really high. And it was interesting when you spoke about the mayonnaise. It just brought me back to what food did for me. You know, what it was doing for me. You know, all the time that it's, you know, that you talked about the effect. You know, and that's really important, because I think that's the part that a lot of people miss, in my opinion, that of who I sponsor. You know, they forget that. I think people just think we have alcoholic foods, but it's what, you know, it's to not feel the feelings. And that's why the pause is really, really good. You know, I still hold space for anger and resentment and fear, but I know what to do with it now. And it doesn't involve the fridge, and it hasn't involved the fridge for the last 2 years. And that for me is really, really important, you know, and if I get annoyed, irritable, restless and discontent, as they say in the book, you know, sometimes I'll just get in the car, I'll just, like you said, set a timer. I will, like a child, count to 10 in my head sometimes, because I just think, shit, I'm going to lose a plot here. And then I do my step 10, and then it's over, you know, and it's over, and, you know, the kitchen was never opened, and it's fine. So, but I still hold space for those feelings at times. And I loved what you said about the share, and I loved how you talked your way through it and how your life changed. And this is a life-changing program. And I think putting the food down at the very beginning is so overwhelming for some people. For me, I was up to 380 pounds. So this was, this was hard work, but nothing. I wouldn't give this up for anything for today anyway. I just wouldn't, because it's given me a freedom. It really has, beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm so glad to be on this journey. And I'm glad that so many people are on this call, because, you know, this works. It really, really works if you put your one foot in front of the other and listen to God. And with that, I'll pass. Thanks.
Thanks, Rita. Next, we have Michelle W, followed by Susan G.
Thank you. Hi, Rick. It's Michelle, compulsive overeater. Thank you so much for your share. Goodness, I really, really identified. I felt like you were telling the story, Rick. Especially when you were talking about, you know, this starting off in your childhood and that sense of ease and comfort that you got from that mayonnaise. And I remember as a little girl come running home from school, you know, to get a really sugary drink, and I'd sit there and I'd take it like an addict, and it would say I would sit there like I was ODing. It was lying down, you know, drinking this really sugary drink, and then, you know, that turned into alcohol and drugs in my teens, and then in my early 20s, and that's what brought me to the 12 steps about 10 years ago. Through going into rehab. And I just so identified with your share, because I was sponsoring in AA and binging at the same time, and I just felt so useless and really rested on my laurels, because I wasn't really doing the full program, because I was binging all the time, and that was taking that sense of restlessness away. And, you know, it was getting to a stage where I couldn't stop eating. And I thought, if I don't do something, I'm absolutely going to relapse back onto drugs and alcohol again. And that was coming. And then my marriage, you mentioned before your relationship, my marriage fell apart because I was absolutely convinced, my stinking thinking, that these people were all doing things against me. My defects, like that engine you described, were all like just telling me this story that wasn't actually even true. And I was so sick, you know, and I came about 2 months ago to OA and I started to do the program, and I'm on my step 9 amends, and, you know, my thinking has cleared so much. You know, I'm so grateful for step 10s being able to do this and for everyone's shares. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Next we have Susan G, followed by Cabrini.
Thank you, Maria. Hi, everybody. Susan, recovered compulsive overeater, dialing in from the middle of La La Land, as Rita so nicely put it. Rick, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who's been of service at this meeting. I love that I have a phone and I can Zoom with you, but I miss seeing everybody's faces on my computer because we all chuckle along together. You know, what I heard today was, I will never be done. And how glad I am that I will never be done. And Rick talked about CIP, continue, improve, practice. And basically that is there from the beginning of the book, right? It tells me we're going to commence shoulder to shoulder. It tells me I'm going to be restored. It tells me I'm going to continue. It tells me I'm going to be at turning points. So it never ever says that I am done. And today I'm so grateful. And I love how you talked about that God is in the pause. And I'm not always really good at that. I'm not sure if my sister's still on or not, but anyway, if she is, she's probably nodding, because this weekend we had a lot of family stuff going on and they were not marching to the beat of my drum. They just weren't doing it. And why are they so silly? Why aren't they just doing it Susan's way? And there was a couple of times I did respond too quickly. But the great thing is about these relationships, outside of my family, I have this herd of recovered people who I've allowed to get to know me, right? I've let you into the spirit, the world of my insanity with my family, so I can make these phone calls. And I don't have to be restless, irritable, and discontented and cause more wreckage. I can take care of it right away. Do I do it perfectly? No. All I had to do was take step 1 perfectly. I had to take both parts of it. If you are new or struggling, welcome to Overeaters Anonymous. If you're struggling, I'm on WhatsApp. I don't have all the answers for you. All I have is what the big book tells you. But please reach out. And again, Rick, thank you so much for sharing with me that you would be here today. Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, Susan. And next up, we have Cabrini L. Hi, Cabrini.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Maria. Hi, Rick. That was a great sharing, and what really inspired me as well, similar to most people, the backgrounds I come from will be similar to your own. But the one thing that did stand out to me was the agnostic that I came into OA too over 30 years ago. I'm very much an agnostic, and with a lot of issues and angers around God, etc. And do you know what? The people in OA all put up with me when I was just thinking back there, like I'd be going on he, she, God, goddess. And of course, I was a lunatic at the time. But like that, it took a while for a solution to come to me, and a spiritual solution. And the other one that I just thought was great is this continuing to en bloc and inviting God in. I thought that was really a beautiful thing that I'll carry that with me now after the meeting and start really looking at that. And I did hear somebody share before, abandon yourself to God. And I can't believe that that's the path I'm going after being back there, he, she, it, God, and annoying everybody. And here I am continuing, like I'm going to practice like yourself, to unblock and invite God in. It's really a marvelous piece of information they're sharing. Thanks, Rick. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Brini, and I'm just going to jump in for a couple of seconds just to say thanks so much, Rick. You get me every time. Every time I hear you, I'm just moved by your share and by the message that you carry. And you spoke about your mom, and I too had similar experience. My mom spent a lot of time when I was growing up in a psychiatric hospital, and I thought that was my problem. I thought that was why I was a compulsive overeater. I was a compulsive overeater well before she ever went in there. born a compulsive overeater. And you spoke about the hole in the soul. And I just looked for external things to fix that hole. Give me something materialistic, and none of them worked. And I tried them all, I just thought there was something just not quite right with me, and I could find, something to fix it, then I'd be okay. And you talked a lot about the steps, Rick, through your journey, and the importance of the steps, because that is the recovery, isn't it? Working these 12 steps. And you spoke about the solution, and you said, continue, improve, and practice, because it's a spiritual awakening that keeps on happening. It's not a being done, and it evolves, because I came into this program with the faith. I had faith, but no relationship with God. You do this and I'll do that, and so it was the bargaining. I bargained with God. Yeah, and I came in, absolutely powerless over food, absolutely beaten by the disease when I came in. And like you, had been in another fellowship for a lot of years, but the credits don't transfer. I tried to work step one in that fellowship and kept falling down every time. And I love what you said as well when you said, the first thought is the old thinking. But it's my second thought, and my first action on that second thought. And you also spoke about, step 11 and seeking through prayer and meditation, and I just love to hear, Rick, just briefly, if you've got time, a couple of minutes, just to tell us, what do you do on a daily basis just to continue your practice of step 11? What does that look like for you? I'd just love to speak to that.
Oh, thanks, Maria. I get more excited about step 11. For me, it's adventures in the fourth dimension, and it can be anything I want it to be to improve this relationship with the God of my understanding. But it always starts in the morning. I wake up and my engine's pretty much fired up and ready to go. My self-centered engine, it's already there, and so it's important for me. As soon as I come into consciousness, I just start talking to my higher power, the God of my understanding, which I just shortened to God, and thank God it is of our understanding. So I start saying, God, I love you and I trust you. I am completely yours today. And, and as I'm getting up and, going through my little morning routine, my little bio breaks that I I need to do, and feeding the cat who's very hungry and letting me know. I'm usually the first one up, and but all during this time I haven't really sat down with my book and anything else. I'm just walking with God. That's how I visualize it. I just invite God into my mind, into my heart. And so as I'm doing this, I'm with God and I'm just opening myself up and asking for direction. And I will get up and I basically, I love reading out of the big book. It keeps me focused on what I'm doing. When I have time, I actually read, I'll start over on page 83, some of the things that really start, there and are hitting me. It's, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. This is a reminder for me. And, when I look through the promises and I put them in present tense and personalize them for me, I am living, I now know a new freedom and a new happiness, all the way through, I am now realizing that God is doing for me what I cannot do on my own. And I look at that and I'm reminded about the continuing and also the promises of neutrality and where the problem's removed and I'm no longer fighting. And I invite God in and I look at my nightly review from the night before. So as I'm reading where the questions that it's telling me on page 86, I'm actually looking at my app and I'm reading the questions and what I put the night before. And then the corrective measures I'm bringing into my day. I'm bringing all my meals into my day. I'm thinking about where all my meals are. Am I prepared for them? Because that's a huge problem if I haven't. It's just basic 101. But then I'm just closing my self-will down. I'm getting Rick out of the way and I'm just inviting God in, to direct my thinking. And I think about my day, and what corrective measures from the night before do I need to be looking at? And the other one is, you know, I ask especially for freedom from self-will, and I'll jump over to page 62 and I can see those 100 forms, you know, of fear, self-delusion, self-pity, self-seeking, you know, and I don't want to be that way today, that extreme example of self-will run riot. And I'm certainly capable of that. And I pray for someone else. And then I remind myself that I will be pausing. And I always think of it as the exciting fear wasp. You know, that if I'm pausing, I'm in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry. I had to rearrange those a little bit to make wasp out of it. So it's worry, anger, self-pity, and foolish decisions, which for me, the foolish decisions are going to come from some form of fear, anger, worry, self-pity. You know, that's where my foolish decisions come from. So this is where, and but there's something about this that is exciting. That's like me picking up the rock and throwing it at a wasp nest. There's something about that my self-will has this dark attraction to. And that's where my pause is like, okay, I'm not going to throw that rock today at that wasp nest. I'm going to drop it. God, you need to help me drop it. You know, and just be grateful. Think of one thing I'm very grateful for and why. And that always prompts me into something else I'm really grateful for and why. But I always give myself an out just with one, because I can always think of one thing I'm very grateful for and why. Wow, that was a lot longer than I thought it would be.
Thanks so much. That was brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rick. That was brilliant. So this is the end of our meeting. Are there any OA announcements? We have a group conscience next week. So if people want to hang back for that after the meeting, that's at 8:15 next week. So I'd like to remind you of Tradition 7 that every OA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. The money pays for rent and literature, and any excess funds will go to intergroup. And Mark has posted a link to PayPal in the chat function. Tradition 12 states that anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all these traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. Therefore, who you see here, what you hear here, when you leave here, please let us stay here. And if we could join together just to thank Rick. Thank you so much again, Rick, for being a service to us here in Dublin today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My thoughts and prayers with all of you. And I do have to go to work, but love you all. And thank you again, Maria. And thank you everyone for being there. You made my whole day. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. I did ask Pat, I don't know if she's still on the line. Thank you, Rick. To read the promises if Pat's still here. If not, somebody else might pick that up first.
I'll read it for you, Maria.
There you go, Cabrini. Thanks so much.
What page is it on?
The promises are on page 83 to 84 of the big book, Cabrini.
Now,
thank you.
If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace, no matter how far down the scale we have gone. We will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them.
Thanks so much, Cabrini. And we will now thank you everybody for being here. And we'll close the meeting by linking hands and saying the Serenity Prayer.
God grant
me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will be done.
Back, it works when you work it, so work at your work.